And so if I were to say, what's the biggest obstacle I hurdled, it's managing people's emotions. It isn't about managing them as much as managing their emotions.
Hey, welcome back. Today we have Dan Korhorn, a friend, a business owner, owner of Pathway Financial, and my neighbor, among many other things. Dan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Let's just get started with little Dan. I guess that's kind of where I usually start. What was it like? Where'd you grow up?
Grew up in Ada. I think my parents built the fourth house on Hall Street, which is the same street Forest Hill Central High School is on. School wasn't even there at the time. About a mile away from where my father grew up. So my grandparents were a mile away in the house that he grew up on, so yeah, they still live there, 55 years later, same house. So young kid, my dad had worked at the local farm around the corner, William Boss Greenhouse, still in existence. And at the time, there was Coetsier across the street, and their family. They're actually related, but it was one business back then. And I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years old, it was time to go to work. And so it was bean picking time. And so little Dan got on his bike and rode over the mile. And this was back when kids could ride their bikes, when they wanted. And I got paid 10 cents a pound to pick green beans in the mornings for a couple days a week. So that's where it started. Evolved out of that. There was, in the same neighboring farmland, there was a celery farm. And so I spent the bulk of my early youth and teenage years on a celery farm in the summertime, sitting on a celery planter and getting to the harvest time, carrying irrigation pipes down a 500-yard field and, goose stepping over wet celery and after school harvesting cabbage and still driving it down to J. Bestman and delivering it in a Ford Custom Deluxe with 3 on the tree when you're 17 years old. So, and then I transitioned into the neighboring greenhouse. It was, more year-round work. And so one of my best friends and his brother owned that company, still in existence. And that's kind of my young through high school years was mainly farming and whether it would be, perennials, annuals, greenhouse, vegetables, things like that. So that's where it all started.
Yeah, it was kind of similar. Like when you're kind of around the edges, like picking asparagus and throwing hay was kind of my first gigs.
And when you were the young one,
hard work
in the loft of the barn on a Saturday at 6:30 at night, unloading the elevator when it's 130 degrees. Yeah, I know the feeling.
That's tough, but it teaches you work ethic for sure.
It does.
Everything else, education, comes easier after that.
So in high school, I had started to develop through an economics class, I kind of had developed this kind of fascination a little bit with the markets and things like that. And back then we kind of did the, 6 weeks of buy stock and sell stock. And I don't remember if I made any money on paper or not, but it kind of got this penchant for the investment side, but I still had this passion for my hands-on work in carpentry. And so my senior year of high school and the year after, I ended up going to Kent Skills Center and did residential construction where we built the house. And I just kind of fell in love with that kind of work. And I asked my wife, I could spend hours out in my shop on a weekend just tinkering and building things and things of that nature. So I kind of thought that was my career path. Right out of high school, got a job working for a remodeler, went into framing of big apartment buildings and things like that. Transitioned from him to more of a custom home builder where I learned how to hand build cabinets, the old fashioned way where, you're still building cabinets in by hand. It takes 3 weeks to do that. And so I kind of thought that's where I was headed. And then I got hurt. And I wouldn't say I have a chronically bad back, but I have a family history, my father, my uncles and things like that, where it just kind of goes. And pulled disc, a couple injuries, and it just became clear that I didn't think my body was going to physically be able to do that for 40 years.
Yeah.
And so I decided to go to college, got my old job back at the greenhouse, and they were quite accommodating with my school schedule. And so then I went back to community college and started studying, going down the finance path. That's kind of where it led. About that time, I was maybe a year and a half in, my, at that time, soon-to-be father-in-law said, hey, I know this guy. Their company's expanding in the financial industry. He goes, maybe I ought to give him a call. So I called him up. His name is Joel. He's now still 28 years later my business partner, and that's kind of where I started. I won't go into the details of where. It's a little bit of a sore spot coming out of it, but it did give me a good education, got me licensed, got me introduced into the business, things like that. And we were there for about 6 years and left for a variety of reasons. And we can talk about that later about, how
Yeah.
firms run. But, and then we founded Pathway in 2005, I think. It's been 20 years already since we started the company. So that's kind of the Reader's Digest version of the background.
Yeah.
So
Let's go a little bit into, so you have a family. Tell us a little bit about your family.
married my wife, Kim. We've been married. It'll be 28 years in August.
Well, congrats. Nice work.
Yeah. She's, up for sainthood. She's tolerated me now for 28 whole years. And it's been, good and bad. And, it's just kind of ups and downs that you have. I have two daughters, 18 and 21. I have a senior in college and a senior in high school. And, we've lived here in Rockford for the better part of 20 years. So kids went all through Rockford schools, and I got one graduating from there, and my oldest is graduating from Ferris in the spring.
So before we get too far into like the maybe more business details, how does having the family and the expectations there go along with running a business, challenges with that, and how do you make time for family and balance that?
Well, at the beginning, it was way out of balance. I remember still vividly the criticisms, and I would hear it from people. It's like, you're always working, you're always working, you're always working. Well, I'm trying to build a business, and so I would leave the house by 8 or 8:30 in the morning. I might come home for dinner, and I might be out until 9 o'clock at night. And I'd work better part of a day on Saturdays, and I did that, I think, till my oldest maybe 4 or 5 years old. And they were maybe when they were a little younger than that, but and that's what it took. And then it transitioned into a business where we have 3 locations, 14 employees, I think, between full and part-time. We have some admin staff that fills in seasonally. And, I'll be somewhere and, I'll hear from my mom, well, do you ever work? Well, which way do you want it? Either I work too much or I don't work enough. So,
Yeah.
So it took a few years to find the balance. And now this time of year is tax, and we have a pretty thriving tax business. So it's probably a little out of balance right now just because of the workload and the time constraints that things have to be done. But we've balanced it out within our office and even our staff that our office is closed on Fridays all summer. We have such a short summertime, so we've given everybody the opportunity. It's like, hey, Monday through Thursday, and enjoy 3-day weekends from Memorial Day to Labor Day. So it's been a process to find the balance, and there's going to be times where it's out of balance for sure. But I think it's been a learning curve for sure. And so what I have learned over the last 10 years or so is,
hey, let's pause for a moment to thank our sponsors, the Palmer Group with 616 Realty, a small experienced real estate team right here in West Michigan with over 20 years experience helping buyers, sellers, builders, and investors reach their real estate goals. We love to solve problems, and we're quite often known as the problem solver. So if you have a real estate challenge, want to look for that dream home, need help figuring out that tricky land deal, give us a call. We'd love to help. You can find more out at ThePalmer.Group. That's ThePalmer.Group, not ThePalmer.com, ThePalmer.Group. Now back to the episode.
You make work balance around your family. Don't balance your family around your work. And I think that's probably been the key. And I've got a few, we've got a few younger guys, on the team. I think Ben, who well, he's 30. A couple younger guys in their early 20s. And it's one of the things that I'm trying to instill in them. It's like, work hard when you work, but be away from work when you're away from work. And so you get to a mentality like that, and we have conversations in the office from a leadership standpoint, and you realize the balance we share now, as Ben quoted the rest, he says, I realize I'm unemployable.
Yes.
I couldn't go get a job. And I think about, with all the things going on in our lives right now with me, with doctor's appointments, things of that nature, I don't know how you'd manage a 40-hour week, 7 to 3:30 job. I don't know. And I give people a lot of credit that have to do that. I've been fortunate enough to have, had great partners and built a business that allows me the freedom to be away if I need to be away. So,
right.
But balance is a key. You get burned out, and I can say that, the tax time I might get burned out by April, and I might be a little snippy. You can ask my family. Don't talk to me. About April 10, don't talk to me.
Yeah.
But that fades. But that's a season, and you go through it, and the rest of the year it's pretty good, and we balance it out.
Yeah, I think the seasons is important. Found that, and I hear talking to a lot of business people, entrepreneurs. It's like that. It's way out of balance early on because you got to build up. You got to get momentum going. You got to build a base, get that foundation, and then it's a little more flexible.
Yeah. Well, and your business is the same. It's relational. Yeah. It's seasonal, right? Houses don't sell well in January and February, but by May you're going to be busy again. It's it goes in cycles, and you just learn to balance around, and your family learns that, there's times that it's, appropriate to ask, can we go here, and times where it's not.
Yeah, the same questions. Do you ever stop working? All we see is the back of your head in the home office.
Yeah.
And for years, that was what it was, because I just had to work.
Yeah.
But now it's mostly repeat and referral.
Yep.
And I can be more flexible, have a team, and can work together that way. So
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about Pathway.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's a lot to unpack.
It's unique.
because
Yeah.
Things, in 28 years of doing this, there's been a lot of changes with the industry, whether it be regulatory, how we do things, it's
Yeah.
not the business I started with a yellow legal pad and you want to set up a mutual fund, and it's a, 1-page triplicate form. You get a copy, I get a copy, and we send one in, and now it's, 32 pages of regulation. So there's been a lot of changes, but started out, doing pretty much investment work, setting up IRAs for people, a little bit of life insurance here and there, with a company that we started with, got licensed in that. And then you get a few years in and you start to realize it became restrictive. And I think for me, the tipping point was, I have a friend who's merging into retirement now, who's a director of a camp in Northern Michigan, an executive director. And he's been there 40 plus years. And they were looking for a key man life insurance policy because a figurehead in place of that magnitude, it takes a couple years to replace someone like that. And so you do have a decline in attendance, and things start to wonder about leadership in the future and things like that. And so they were hunting for a pretty good sized life insurance policy. And I was with a company that had one, that's all they could do. And it was about 4 times what was available on the open market. And I finally called them, like, is there anything, can you resell this? No. And you started to realize that they were heavy-handed. You have to fit into this box. All the clients need to do this, and there was no autonomy. And then you start reading through the paperwork, and you realize that there's all these caveats. If I want to leave, well, they're not really my clients; they're theirs. Which I would argue, I'm like, but you give me a 1099, I'm not an employee, so And so then I won't get into it. There's been a lot of lawsuits filed after the fact. Not me personally, but my partner, and I know a lot of people that have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars defending themselves leaving. So it was kind of a tipping point where a handful of us had just realized it's like, for us to best serve our client, I can't answer to a corporation. I have to put their best interest forward. I can't pigeonhole them into something because the company says this is where they need to be or this is more profitable. I owed my clients an obligation to provide the best that I could find. And so that's kind of where we started. Maintain the same philosophy, buy term insurance, invest the difference in an IRA, but all of a sudden you realize you're not captive. It's like, well, wait a minute, there's 25 life insurance companies and they're all way more competitive. And, I can use Fidelity now, and I can, and all these investment companies. And so you start expanding into that, and realize that there's,
So you're mix and matching for the client. What's best for them? You're kind of brokering in a sense.
What's appropriate for one family is not appropriate for the other. So one of the things that I still say we do is, we do have certain model things that we follow, but we try to, and I know the word holistic is used way too often in today's terms, but we try to address every family based on what they're after. And I like to start a question, what's important about money to you? Because what's important to me might not be important to you, right? And so I kind of want to craft what we do. And so over the years, we started to expand. And so the tax thing, which we can talk about more today because that's the season we're in. So my business partner now, Brian, he used to be an owner at a firm in Holland called LVS Financial. It's a big accounting firm. And he was one of the owners. And so we would just refer all the business to him. It's like clients would ask, hey, Brian's our guy, and work with him. And he took a call to be a missionary in Africa for about 8 years. And he's like, hey, we're leaving, I'm selling, and we're going to be gone, and I don't know when we're going to be back. And so he's like, but I can teach you guys how to do this. And so one of my partners got his enrolled agent designation from the IRS. We bought the software, and I think the first year we might have done 15 or 16 tax returns, and then it went to 35, And back then it was Skype, if you remember that.
Oh, yeah.
and so we would do it, and then he would look at it, on his time zone, and then we'd Skype back and forth. And that's kind of how it started. And I'm going to say it was probably because his oldest is graduating from college. So I'm going to say almost 8 years ago, they kind of decided it was time to come home, kids going into high school and things like that. And then there was a family tragedy, and so it brought him home a little early, and so we had time to get together. And it became, well, what are you going to do? And he's like, well, I'll do some consulting, do some accounting work. I don't know what I'm going to do. And we had met at the Rainbow Grill there in Hudsonville.
Oh, yeah.
I remember we were driving back to the office, and I don't think we're even onto the highway off the ramp yet. And I looked at my partner, and I said, what are we doing? Why don't we just have him come and work with us, and we can buy in, he could be a partner tomorrow. We've known him forever. It's not like you got to earn it. And so we kind of had decided, and, he was home for funerals and things like that. And so it was a little bit of a tepid time to really have those conversations. But before we went back, we kind of approached it. And he says, Anita and I will talk about it, pray about it. And about a week later, he's like, yeah, I think that's kind of the plan. And so they went back to Africa. He was done with his obligation there, but they had adopted 2 girls, and so they're waiting for the State Department to get the paperwork. So they're stuck in Africa for 6, 9, 12. They didn't know.
Yeah.
And so he decided to study for a certified financial planner test. He's like, I got all day. He goes, I'll just treat it as a job.
Sure.
At the time, Justin Amash was their state rep, and I think he might have had some influence to kind of push it through a little quicker. So they came home late summer, August, I believe. And so he took the test and passed it. And then he was back. And by that January, we were full tilt with a tax planning business that we had actually had, was pretty successful at the time. But then you add a guy now that brought all the accounting, which allowed us to expand into accounting for small business. And we have well over 100 small businesses that we do accounting for, and 2 accountants. And so that's just one step in the process. In the last 7 to 8 years, we've started to look at estate planning. And not that there's not unfit attorneys, but I have found, and this may offend people that watch this, but attorneys have this general propensity to start out really good, and then they just stop calling people back after 2 years. And I've been through it with 4 or 5 different estate planning attorneys over the last 20 years, and just, we have this great relationship, and then you just stop returning calls. And so we've partnered with a company that is a legal firm, but is designed to work with financial advisors, and we kind of sub-advise, and they still craft these estate plans. So we've expanded into that. A lot more financial planning. It's not just, I'm going to take your money and put it here. It's like, let's craft a program. Let's get on a budget. And here's what we got to have to retire. And here's what it looks like when you take the money out. And so our business has expanded dramatically. Investment choices and options have changed. And, we're doing things, that nobody ever heard of. Algorithms that do tax loss harvesting, which we used to have to do it manually, or we said we would do it and we never did at the end of the year. So a lot of evolution. For sure, in the business. And it's one of those things that if you don't pay attention, you're going to be these guys that I see all the time that have this little book of business that nobody wants to buy because they never changed with the times. They're still doing things the way they did 15 or 20 years ago. Now, that doesn't influence my investment policy, which we can talk about later, because that has not changed, and it won't change 50 years from now, my philosophy on that. But how we approach things, how we manage things has changed dramatically over the last 25 years, to say the least.
Yeah, in our conversation beforehand, just talking about AI. And one thing, because that's the hot topic lately, is, I think the people that you already have the background of a knowledge and experience, you can type in something in AI and figure out yourself, but there's so many inaccuracies right now, and you just don't know how to best prompt it, how to use that information that it shares to best suit a customer. Not you, in general, a random person. So that's the advantage of having all that experience and being able to kind of match that tool together.
You filter out what doesn't make sense.
Right.
Yeah. So, but I used it this morning. I had a weird case, and I thought, I think this is right, but I've never actually had this happen. Somebody had 2 different types of retirement plans for the same company in 1 year, and I didn't think that was correct. Like, I could spend an hour researching the IRS website and find the code, which is what I normally will do with these cases when I have something every day. It feels like that's an anomaly. But we don't use a generic standard off-the-shelf AI. We use something different, and I put it in there, and it linked me right to the IRS code section that I needed. And so we don't necessarily use it to get answers as much as we use it to shrink the amount of time it helps for us to find the answer. So I still went to the code. I just didn't have to pour through 200 pages to find the line item I was looking for in the code. I let the AI do that for me. So that's where we're leveraging it to our advantage. We don't use it in investments. We do use some algorithm-based trading platforms that have algorithm triggers, but that is not AI generated, so to speak. But we do some things like that as well. So like technology, but we are also the not jump into it head first. And so it's just like when a new investment philosophy or theory, we won't get into it. Direct indexing is kind of the newest trend. We generally kind of have this propensity of fear for our clients. And so a lot of times if something sounds good and it looks good on paper, we will usually put our own money or kind of guinea pig some of these systems with our own stuff for 6 months to a year before we bring it out to the public.
Sure.
Just to make sure that we don't, I can handle if I hurt myself, but it's, you're the steward of someone else's money when it's their money, and you want to be really careful about that. So we kind of have that approach to a lot of things.
And that stuff's super common with people. They hear something from friends.
Yep.
And so now they're throwing a bunch of money at something that sounds like a hot thing. Well, by that time they're hearing about it, it's probably at the top of its cycle.
Yeah.
And so, that's where you guys come in.
Yeah. Well, I hear about it. Gold. I should buy gold.
Probably. Yeah.
No. Yeah. Look what it costs. I'm like, that's exactly why you don't buy it. You should have bought it 4 years ago. Don't buy it today. It's the highest price it's been. You don't want to buy it you don't want to pay a premium. You want to buy it on sale.
Yeah.
And so the theory is I want to buy it because it's doing well. Well, no, you want to buy things when they're on sale.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
The old adage, buy low, sell high, but
that people's mental capacity and stamina is the fear always triggers the opposite reaction.
Yeah.
And so if I were to say, what's the biggest obstacle I hurdle, it's managing people's emotions. It isn't about managing them as much as managing their emotions and keeping them invested for, frequent but short-lived downturns of the market.
Yeah, I think my business is the same way in real estate quite often. A lot of emotion creeps in on things. You just got to work through.
Yeah.
Half the job psychology.
we do pretty good. When we have big market drops, we don't get a lot of panicked phone calls. And I know other guys at other firms that, their phones ring off, look, everybody's panicking. I don't know, maybe call it we're just blessed or we've communicated it well over the years. We don't generally get a lot of those panic calls.
Well, when you've been dealing with often the same people for many years, plus their referrals and repeats, and you've seen it and you've seen the ups and downs, it's just a lot more steady.
The benefit I have, I think I was telling one of your counterparts earlier, I have a few fourth generation money.
Yeah.
So it's easy to have two or three, and I have a handful that's fourth generation. My great grandpa said to call you about this. So fortunately, I have a handful of young guys in my office, and so now it's like you don't want to work with me. I'm going to retire. But work with Ben or AJ or Mikey. They're going to be around for the next 30 years. You can have a relationship with them. So we keep it in house, but I'm not necessarily the one that I'm kind of my dance card's kind of full right now.
Sure. Yeah, you got.
And usually that goes well because they're still working with the same company, and there's this family legacy. And sometimes your grandpa, your dad, we're still here and we understand what's going on. So
yeah, it's nice you can have the internal conversation without being direct.
So generational wealth planning, we talk about that a lot, and we talk about it a lot. We don't do it as often as I think we probably should, but we're getting better at it.
What's what's kind of your clientele? Like, what would you say generational wealth planning? What's that mean? Break it down.
Well, it's going to be contrary to what most people think when they think financial advisor. Only one of us, I take that back. One of our office, basically our operations manager. We've only got 2 degrees in our office. My partner was in rental property and laid carpet with his dad for a living before he got into this. I was a carpenter, a farmer, went to college for a couple of years, dropped out because I realized that, and this is not a knock on college. I have a wife that's a college professor, so that's not a knock on college. But my professors are telling me things, and I'm like, that's not how it works. Yes, no, I do it already. Well, the book says, the book's wrong, right?
Yeah.
And so we like to say we're still blue collar. I mean, to the extent do I have really wealthy clients that make millions of dollars a year? Yes, I do, but they're few and far between. And we have this tendency in our industry where people get in, they're looking for that whale all the time with, I need a guy to invest $1.5 million with me tomorrow. And I'm more of what if we just got 20 clients a month that did 50?
Sure.
Which is a lot more prevalent out there. And so it's more work, but it's more relational based. So, what's my ideal client? You're married, you own a home, you got 2 cars, you work both full-time or one full-time, part-time, you got a couple of kids, and you're trying to scratch a little bit of money away for them to go to college, and you want to retire at 65 if you can, and you want to pay your house off. That's our ideal client. I'm not going to say no to the wealthy doctor, things like
Sure.
that, but that's not who we are trying to attract. I'm looking for people that have the same background as me. And so you'd probably be scary if you knew the number of electricians and plumbers and carpenters and roofers and, that I have for clients. It far, far outnumbers the attorneys and doctors.
Yeah. That's the great thing about being a local business
Yeah.
and, kind of in the weeds still, and not having that corporate pressure from up high
Right.
of just selling.
Right.
So cool. Let's see. I'm trying to think of what else we wanted to hit there. What's the uniqueness about having both the tax and the financial planning together in one shop?
Great question, because I get that a lot. Because there's a general divide within the industry. You either do tax or you do investment. And so what I find is I will have clients that will come in and, well, my tax guy said this. Yeah, no, that's not how it works. But more often than not, I get an investment professional that has botched things, and I'm like, that's against the law, and this is, and so that's kind of why we got into it, because we realized that if you really want to be a good financial advisor, again, back to that buzzword holistic, you really have to understand both sides of the coin. The dilemma is, and if you pick up, you have a competitor across the street, right? If you were to go pick up his business card, and I know him, he's a great guy, but it'll say, we do not give legal or tax advice. They're not allowed to.
It's so frustrating on the consumer side.
They may know, they may not know. I had a case this morning where I was a little dumbfounded, and I had to kind of bite my tongue with the client, and I'm like, this is stuff they should have learned the first day, kind of mistakes. And so for us, it became a point where if you really think about it, every investment decision I make for a client, or every investment decision a client makes, has some sort of tax impact, whether positive or negative. There's a positive and negative consequence to every decision we make. And that's really what kind of made us focus on it. It wasn't kind of the workload I had expected, where we're doing a couple thousand tax returns a year. But it has, I feel, made us much better advisors, because we understand the consequence of a decision we make with someone's investments. And we can make better informed decisions. And, my goal is obviously, pay as least tax as you want, and right? Isn't that the goal?
Right. Yeah. Keep more
of your money.
Not how much you make, how much you keep.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's maybe one or two things that you kind of see as common mistakes, the most common misconceptions or mistakes in either tax or financial planning?
Oh boy. On the investment side, it's bailing out of the market when it goes down.
Yeah.
That will be my number one. And, this time is different. Maybe, but it hasn't been different in 200 years. I remember the 2008 crash. I was through 1999 and 2000. I had one mutual fund in 1999 that did 132%. I have a new tongue today. I can't do anything with it. 132% rate of return in 1999, negative 36 in 2000. Do you bail out? I mean, I didn't, right?
Yeah.
The story I tell the most, I bought my first shares of Walt Disney stock in October of 2001. So you think about the significance of that date.
Yeah.
What happened the month before? Right?
Yeah.
Disney theme parks were closed. Nobody's going to travel. Nobody's ever going to go to Disney. Everybody's going to be scared. And a guy like me looks at it and realizes at the time, well, less than 20% of the revenue comes from theme parks. So even if that were the case, I think they're probably going to survive with television and all that. I paid $7.54 a share. Still have it.
Yeah.
And it's trading, I don't know, I haven't looked in a week or two, but 112, 110, right?
Yeah.
So it's been as high as 200. And then they got into some political foray with the last president here a couple of years ago, and that kind of hurt them a little bit, but they've kind of bounced back. And their earnings report last week was fantastic, and they've got the right people at the helm. So that's a lesson in the investment side. Tax side, the biggest thing I would tell you, well, there's two. I would tell you, number one, unless it's absolutely necessary, do not take money out of your retirement account unless you're going to lose your house. Hospitals work out payment plans. You can work out debt creditor things or make payment plans. You do not have to cash out $50,000 to pay off the hospital, right?
Yeah.
Penalties, it increases your tax bracket. You pay a 10% penalty, so all of a sudden you start figuring if you're in a 20% bracket and a 10% penalty in the state, 35% of your money, you're giving up 35% of your money in penalties. So, do strenuous circumstances happen where that's the only option? Yes, it happens, and I will never berate anybody or try. I understand the need if it's that, but sometimes I look at it because, I have somebody says, well, I need to take $10,000 out for my kid to have braces. I'm like, every orthodontist I know does payment plan.
Yeah.
So that'd be number one. Number two, and probably more important, a lot of people start a side hustle, self-employed, they're doing something on the side, and that's a sole proprietor. And what happens is they'll have a good first year, and then they get a phone call from me, and it's like, hey, you owe the IRS $8,000. Well, and they are dumbfounded. Well, a couple things. Number one, you didn't have any taxes withheld like you do from your paycheck, which is first and foremost. But the bigger piece of the pie is they forget that you also pay Social Security and Medicare tax, but your employer pays half of it. And so when you go on your own, that 15.3% is all yours, plus your federal tax bracket, plus your state tax bracket. And so I would tell anybody, I am entrepreneur-minded. I love seeing people in down economies really inspire entrepreneurship. People lose their jobs and they start something. Both my brother-in-laws, circumstance led to that, and they both started businesses. They're both very successful now. But they miss that part. It's like, hey, you got to pay taxes. And so those are probably the two biggest tax things I tell people. If you can avoid taking money out of retirement, do that. But understand the tax consequences of being your own boss.
Yeah, it's a hard lesson to learn.
It is.
I may or may not have learned that the hard way.
We've had those conversations over the years, right? But that was a long time ago. So yeah, you figured it out too. But it's a learning curve, and I would never discourage anyone from starting a business. But sometimes it's like, hey, seek a little counsel and like, hey, I'm going to do this. What do I need to watch out for? And so we set up a lot of businesses a year, and for some reason I got in this vein where I'm setting up a lot of counseling practices the last 3 or 4 years. And it's the same conversation. It's like, we need to do this, we need to do quarterly, and we get to the end of the year and they don't have this big, scary, like, I don't know how I'm going to pay this bill.
Right.
So those are probably my two big takeaways on the tax side.
That's great advice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's see. I'm kind of off the start the biz, struggles, lessons, mistakes. I guess what's maybe
Don't ask about mistakes. There's too many to count.
Well, like, how's it working with partners? Because there's two sides of that coin.
There is, and I have heard every horror story that there is, and I can honestly say that I have not had that. Now, that comes from a mutual respect. We know we can get upset, yell at each other, and slam a door, but at the end of the day, we're all still pulling on the same rope. And my partner Joel and I that started it 28 years ago. Brian's been 8 years. Ben has been working for us for 9, and partner for 2.
Mm-hmm.
We can all have those hard conversations that we're not afraid to call each other out.
Yeah.
But in a respectful way, respect each other. So I've heard the horror stories, but we've never experienced that because I think we have very good open lines of communication. And we kind of all have the same kind of thought process and how we approach things, same work ethic, same, mentality. I would say my partner Brian brings a little piece to it, having more of a missionary background and a servant's heart. He kind of sometimes can be the one that can tone the rest of us down and calm us down and say, just back up, let's think this through. So I've been really fortunate with having, working with guys that we're like-minded, but we can have open and honest conversations. And so we, if there's conflict, we address it.
Mm-hmm.
We don't always agree. Majority rules sometimes. And so there's been decisions made that I haven't agreed with, but, there's been decisions that some of them haven't agreed with that I have. And so we've maintained a great working relationship. And so it's unfortunately not something I can speak to real well because we haven't really had any conflict.
That's speaking to it really well. I mean, really open communication. I said similarly yoked in terms of your value system. All similar work ethic.
We all grew up Christian Reformed and we all take pills for it still, so if that helps.
Yeah. So, but all those things, it's been a couple of years now, Ray Dalio's book on principles, and that was one of them too. It's like the I don't know if radical transparency or honesty, but just communicating. It seems like I think every conflict, whether it's in personal relationships or business or politics. So much of it comes down to communication and effectively,
Don't I
understanding.
know, I have a wife and 2 daughters.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Another girl dad,
Yeah.
outnumbered.
Yes, by a mile.
And they think it's a whole different communication style.
I'm like, if you just want something, say it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I've heard the horror story, so I can say that I've been very, very fortunate, and I don't know, I don't believe in luck, but it's certainly been a source of, there's a confidence there. It's like, I'm out a lot these days, and so I don't worry about the work getting done, and they're not worried about his Dan getting his work done, and we don't have any of those, and they're willing to step in. Somebody, Ben had something come up. It's like all of a sudden change. We're going to go out to our house in Maine for 2 weeks. Oh, okay. And we cover, and it was kind of unexpected, an extra something came up, and I'm all right, well, whatever, we cover it. So we have that ability to, kind of cover for each other too, and things come up, randomly. So
Yeah. Just being good neighbors, friends, like family.
yeah, we all get along. Our wives all get along, so it's really good.
That's
I don't
awesome.
think our wives would want to be in business with any of us together, but that's
Sure. Well, that's great. So what's next kind of on for Pathway? Anything new? Just keeping the path?
growing. We opened an office, so I one of my really good friends for quite a few years. He had a son that was business minded, and he always would tell him through junior high school, you ought to talk to Dan. When he came down to Grace Bible College as a freshman, his dad, I knew he was coming, and he came, and we said, well, let's try it as a little apprenticeship internship, and that lasted about 2 months, and we're like, well, why don't you just start working part-time? You can come in the office when you're not in school and things like that, and that lasted about a year, and then his wife finished up her master's work, I believe it was her master's. I don't remember. They had to be on site, so they moved down to the Detroit area, and I'm like, well, you know what? Just work remotely. And so that's been 5 years now, and so he actually now he's an enrolled agent with the IRS. He's a licensed investment advisor rep, and he runs our office in Traverse City. So he's 23 years old, and a lot of responsibility, but I trust him. I mean, I know his family. I know he grew up. He's a preacher's kid, and he's been a great kid. And so we're expanding, and we're in this weird. I don't know what to call it. We're in this weird transition period where I'll go to these meetings, where investment companies have a meeting, there'll be 100 or 200 advisors locally. And I look around, and I'm probably on the younger side. And then I have my, our young guys with them, and there's nobody their age in these rooms. And so we have this industry that's like, well, the average going price is 2 to 2.5 times your revenue. And I'm like, well, how would I sell this thing? Because I know what it's worth. We've gone through we'll probably talk about a variety of reasons. We had to go through a business evaluation in the last 2 years to really know what it's worth. Like, why would I give this all up for 2 years of my paycheck?
Yeah.
And so I don't understand that. And I have counterparts that work in town, and, well, we can't take on any more clients. There's a CPA firm down the hall from me, and they're purging clients every year. Oh, we can't take on more clients. And I'm like, well, your head CPA, I went to high school, grade school and high school. She's my age, and you don't have anybody younger, and I'm 52 years old. And I'm of the belief, I'm like, well, if you have that much more work coming in, hire more people. And so our future is, so the way we've built our business and structured it from stock and ownership and things like that, it becomes perpetual. So my hope would be in 40 years, when I'm long gone, the business still stands. I don't know who owns it, but it's still around.
Right.
I mean, my nephew's going to start working for us in the fall. He's graduating from high school. He's going to go to college for a business degree. Well, he hasn't decided. He asked me. I said, well, I can teach you numbers. I said, I'd get a psychology degree, to be honest with you. Knowing what we do. But he had gotten some advice from his other uncle on his mother's side and a guy from church. Oh, don't go into financial planning. There's no work. There's no work there. And it's saturated. I'm like, I don't know where you live, but I can't take on more work because we don't have the bodies.
And you're in a like and trust business too. It's very personal, relationship oriented. It's not quite I think people see a lot of that as a one time a year type of thing, or once every so many years type of thing, versus you're kind of in the weeds more, more consultative.
It is kind of this really funny thing, and it's not to diminish anybody's thoughts, but my wealthiest clients are the ones that could care less.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, we need to sit down and talk about this. He goes, is there anything changed? I says, well, no, but well, what do we need to sit down for? And part of me wants to say, well, I want you to feel like I'm earning what you're paying me for,
Yeah.
right? But then I'll have the client that's got $32,000 and they want to meet 3 or 4 times a year, which, we'll have a phone call or a Zoom. I don't ever turn that down. And so you can take 2 roads with that thought process of, I don't care, but I've never been that way because I still understand what it's like to be, we joke in our office, PhD, poor, hungry, and driven, right?
Mhm, sure.
I understand that $32,000 is all you have. And so you are worried about it. And I take that pretty seriously. It's like I said at the beginning, I am the steward of that money. And so I like to think that I hold that $32,000 with as much respect as I hold $2 million.
Yeah.
It might be a few more zeros, but how I'm going to treat you is not going to be any different. But I find the people that, have, just scraping by and it's just all they have are more concerned than the people that have a high net worth. They just tend to look at, so well, if nothing changed, we don't. He goes, I can come in, but do you really need me to?
Makes
Well,
sense.
it's up to you. So
Yeah.
So it's kind of that approach when you look at it, and that's again, it's all relational driven. It's kind of like your business. If they didn't have the relationship there, but I think that's why it affords us because it's like I said at the beginning, more blue collar. I'm going to take your grandson calls me with his $7,000 rollover from his first job. It's not the kind of clientele that I'm working in every day now after almost 30 years. I'm not going to say no, but I will pass it on and say, hey, work with, one of these guys you will be with we talked about that, be with for 30 years. So, so I'm not in the position of giving money away and giving business away. So where's Pathway going? I don't know. 20 years from now, we might have 6 locations. I don't know.
So what do you have for locations now?
So we have our main office in Grand Rapids. We're right on the Beltline in 96. We have an office in Holland right on, I don't know if it's 16th or Adams, but right by 31. We have an office there, and we have an office in just out on the outskirts of downtown Traverse City, near the airport.
Okay.
So,
And if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way?
phone number, website.
Okay.
I'm
Google, Google.
yeah. At pathwayfinancialdesign.com. It is getting a facelift, so if anybody goes there and it looks dated, it is because at the end of the day, it's just a business card for us. I'm not trying to use it for marketing, but we are in the process of making it look a little more clean and professional. So it's in the works. So, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So we've kind of covered a lot of that. Now, recently, in the past couple of years, if you don't mind going this
Talk about it. I
direction,
knew you were going to go here.
I'd love to. I mean, talk about the challenges. I think there's a lot that people can learn.
Yeah.
You were diagnosed with cancer. Can you just tell us a little bit about that, how you found out and how it...
So it was during tax time in 2023. I started to notice I was having trouble. It felt like food was getting kind of stuck in my chest when I swallow. Not all the time, but once in a while.
Mhm.
And so it had been going on, but I'm obviously too busy. I'm not going to go to the doctor in, February or March. I'm too busy, and I was just going to wait till spring. Well, we were getting ready for a trip. We had a wedding to go to in Italy, and so we were going to be gone for a few weeks. And my wife was like, I'm not going to have you choke and end up in a hospital in Europe. You need to go to the doctor. So I went to my doctor, and, he's like, well, it's probably a stricture. He goes, at your age, it happens. We, put a scope down, we put a little balloon in there and just kind of expand it and stretch it back out. So I work with an independent doctor, so I don't really deal with a big healthcare corporation. So I was that was a Wednesday. So the following Tuesday, I was in for a scope already with his guy. And there was a stricture there, but he told my wife, he's like, I took a biopsy. He goes, look kind of raw and it just doesn't look good in there. And so that Friday was June 16th. I, of course, get the my chart.
Mm-hmm.
Doctor's out of town. I'm like, adenocarcinoma. I'm like, I think that's cancer. I'm looking up, I'm like, huh. I remember I was out getting my car worked on and I drove home and I walked into the house about 10 o'clock in the morning. There's tears and they had read it. And I'm like, yeah, this probably isn't good. Now, the following Wednesday, we're supposed to leave for Europe for 3 weeks. So, so went, I talked to my doctor. He's like, we're not going to do anything in 2 or 3 weeks. So had all the testing and stuff scheduled for when we got back. And so in early July or middle of July when we got back, they did a full PET scan and they had found it was cancer in right where my esophagus and stomach meet. So it was a tumor growing in there. It was starting to pinch off that thing.
Mm-hmm.
So the scan, then I had 3 lymph nodes that showed up that, I had gotten into a couple lymph nodes. And so the prognosis was we were going to do a little bit of chemo and radiation to shrink it and then surgery. So on November 29 of 2020, 3. Your stomach looks like a football. They took about the top third of it. They cut it off,
Wow.
rolled it over and stitched it together.
Mm-hmm.
Cut my esophagus out just below my windpipe, just about right up in here.
Okay.
And then they stretched my stomach up and re-stitched it, cut all that out. And so I lost the valve, the acid valve, but I also lost my stomach. And then the valve that from your stomach to your intestine, they stitched that open so that it can't close. And then they cut the vagus nerve, which controls appetite, fullness, the valve opening and closing.
Yeah.
So now I have a straight, it goes right into my intestine. So if I vomit or anything, it comes all the way out of my intestine. And unfortunately, it's only happened once.
Yeah.
And so that was, they were pursuing what they said was a curable treatment plan.
Yep.
And so they got all the lymph nodes, they got everything. The margins were clear at the time. I had a follow-up scan in January. Now, it sidelined me for, supposed to be 3 months. So it sidelined me for I got home from the hospital on the 10th of December. Met with a client on the 28th of December. I was back in the office. Well, I was working by the 8th.
Yeah.
By the next week, I was in the office a day or two for a few hours, so I didn't really, the doctor said to rest. I'm like, if you want me to die, it'll be laying on a couch. I can't. But I took it easy.
Yeah.
So I had a scan in January, and there were a couple of lymph nodes that looked enlarged, but they thought, well, it's probably reactive from all the surgery and things like that. I had another scan in March, same outcome, and they're like, well, we'll just kind of keep on it. And then June of last year, this isn't good. And they did a PET scan, and the cancer had spread into those 2 lymph nodes just outside my lung. It is in my thyroid. There's a spot in my liver, and then there's 3 lymph nodes in my abdomen that now are cancerous. So that was July of last year. And so there are really no surgical options because I have a fantastic thoracic surgeon, but he said, it's too close to your heart. We can't get them. And he goes, leaving 1%, you might as well leave it all. It's just not we can't pursue that. And so then it's like, well, do you do surgery? And the spot in my liver is so deep, it's so small and so deep, they can't even get in there to biopsy it yet. And so there are no really other treatment options today other than chemotherapy. So we had done an immunotherapy routine in January. The idea was to, if they missed anything, it would wipe it out. But obviously that it didn't work for me. And so I'm back on chemo every 2 weeks. So it's stage 4 metastatic carcinoma. It is not curable. It will never go away. And we're in a position now where all we do is try to keep it tame.
Yeah.
So I had a scan in October and showed a pretty decent reduction in size of everything. I had one in January with no change. Nothing had grown, but then there was a spot on my lung, which the doctor is convinced is an infection. And so he put me on a really nasty antibiotic for 2 weeks. Consequently, about 3 days later, it came down to a really bad respiratory, so it kind of made sense. And in his theory, he's like, I'm not sure how you'd get a spot that big in your lung, and the rest of the cancer didn't grow. So he's like, and he's 35 years. So before I came here, I had a CAT scan to check on the progress of that. So I will know tonight if that spot is gone. So we're on a chemotherapy routine every 2 weeks, as long as it works, and then hopefully it works long enough because, if you pay attention, cancer research is moving at warp speed right now with cancer vaccines and these immunotherapy drugs. And they're doing a new hypostomy treatment, which it's a liquid, almost like a liquid laser jet to destroy tumors with a lot of success. They've done one in Grand Rapids.
Okay.
I'm not a candidate for it yet just because of where things are. But, my oncologist, we may not see eye to eye in his bedside manner, but he is, my research, he is probably the best in the Midwest for the kind of cancers. And he has a patient right now that had colorectal cancer, which is similar to mine. Mine's a little more aggressive, but similar, with a 2-year life expectancy. And he's been stage 4 for 12 years.
Wow.
So is it a death sentence? Yeah. Is it tomorrow? Probably not. Right? Could be 6 months, could be 6 years. We don't know.
So knowing that, and since you probably, I would imagine early on, your thought process was a little different than maybe it is now, given the change in it, how did that affect like family relationships? What do you, like, how did it affect your decision making? Like,
Well,
What
it
goes
puts
through your
things in
mind?
perspective. And so a lot of people, are you stressed out about it? I'm like, no, I haven't lost an ounce of sleep. I don't worry about it. I mean, it is what it is. And, sometimes when I'll tell my wife, I'm like, I'm not going to be around. She goes, well, you don't know that. So it's hard on my girls, they're 18 and 21 and just to digest it. And we don't talk about it a lot because I just kind of, to me, it's just an irritant to my day. I got to go to the doctor tomorrow morning to go over these scans. Well, it's just, I don't have time for this. I got to get to work, And so,
Yeah.
not that I'm driven by work, but maybe I'm mentally ill. To me, it's an irritant to my day.
Sure.
It's a distraction, and I'm like, I got a lot more important things I could be doing than this. But it's been hard at home because I can tell, the effects of chemo now, being on it. I was on it before, radiation, 25 rounds. That was pretty brutal. And now I've been on chemo for 7 or 8 months. It's starting to wear. Neuropathy is bad. My fuse is a lot shorter, and so I have a tendency to, just kind of lose my temper a little bit more often than I used to. And it's partly chemo, it's partly, when all of a sudden you're condensing time frames, you know what you got left, you realize what's important. It's like, I don't have time to argue. I'm not going to waste my time arguing. And if something comes up where I don't like it, I kind of snap back at it because I just don't want to deal with it because it's not important anymore. Well, the problem is it's probably important to other people. It's just not important to me.
Right.
So my family bared a little bit of the brunt of that, just having to deal with, a little bit of mood swings, things like that, Can it be bad? Probably. And it's just, but I'm one of those guys, you've known me long enough. I'm a scorched earth kind of guy when you go too far, and I will take it all the way to the end, which, is probably not the appropriate response ever. But, when it's your family, sometimes, I dig my heels in probably a lot harder than I probably should.
Yeah.
And so they probably pay the biggest price for that than anybody else. And it's probably the ones that should pay the least. But it puts things in perspective. It's like, what's important to people. My mom asked me this a couple of weeks ago, you thought about retiring? Yeah, but what would I do? My wife loves what she does. I got kids in school. I could try to play golf every day, but what am I going to go to Florida for 2 months by myself?
Yeah.
And I love what I do, so it's really not an option. The dilemma becomes, I got to be in therapy every 2 weeks. And so trying to plan a vacation or, you kind of, unfortunately, I live my life in 3-month blocks. It's like, you get a good scan, well, you won't think about it for a couple months until the next one. Is this going to be the bad one, right? So it's kind of hard to put things in real perspective. We've done a lot of things, businesses all my loose ends, my estate plans, and, so there's not any financial concerns, but, everything will be turnkey, when I'm gone, but it's, my nieces and nephews will ask, and I know they worry about it. And, one of my nephews asked him, like, buddy, I'm along for the ride at this point. I'm a guy that if I want something or I'm going to go after something, I'm going to go after it, and I'm probably going to get it. This is the first time in my life where I have no control.
Yeah.
None. So, like I say, I'm along for the ride. I got a great doctor. I got great doctors. We have good modern medicine. I see a holistic doctor as well. So I'm not I believe in Western medicine, but I don't think that's cure-all. I think some things my grandma used to do probably work too. So I kind of, I don't throw away any current Western medicine, but I do a lot of therapeutic things that have shown through research that can help. Will it in the end make a difference? I don't know, but it's certainly not things that are hurting me. Diet, certain things I eat or don't eat. My diet is not going to be the end. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So it's a perspective thing, and it's the struggle I have. The hard part for me is, I worry about my kids. I'm like, man, I can be, married and be a little more independent of me. It's just, this. I know 4 other people that have the same cancer I do, but they're all in their 70s, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm way on the young side for this. And so that's kind of my big thing is I worry about, my wife will be, she'll be fine. And she's pretty resilient. Her mom died of cancer 9 years ago. Her dad went through brain tumor and been through massive health issues. And, so she, I don't want that for her, but my girls are at that age where it's like, I just would like them to be a little older and a little more independent, Then I have to deal with this. Yeah. Can they be in their 30s? It just seems like it'd be easier. But
yeah,
I don't control it. I don't have any say.
I guess that's probably to some extent freeing as much as it can be, because you just can't do anything
I
about
mean,
it.
I don't lay awake
You do what you're going to do. And
anxiety, worrying about it.
Yeah.
You know, you take anxiety meds. No, why? You don't have anxiety? I'm like, fate sealed. I just,
Sure.
you know, the difference is I'm on an accelerated plan. We're all going to die.
Yeah.
I just was thinking I was going to be in my 80s, not my 50s.
Mhm.
Now, could I make it to 80? I could. Never know. But, you know, statistically, no.
Yeah. So this is something that comes up. You know, I know obviously there's a lot of people, especially the past few years. I don't know if it's age or what, but a lot of people I know have cancer or have illnesses that we don't know how long they have, and it's difficult to speak with them. It's almost like I think of it a little bit as like going to a funeral. It's like, what do you say to the widow or the widower when somebody is sick with a serious illness like cancer or stage 4? Like, how does a friend or family member provide support? Like, you ask how you doing. It almost seems awkward because you know that they might be struggling. One week might be better. One day might be better.
Yeah.
What's your advice for
Easy
people?
answer, unbelievable.
Yeah.
Can go either way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've been where you're at. What do you say? You know, last year I had 2 clients that had buried their children. What do you say? 17 years old, 30 years old? I don't know what to say, right? Both of them were shocked to see me.
Mhm.
You made it. You came all the way out here. Yeah, I came all the way out here. I can tell you what doesn't help. Sending me videos and texts about what your cousin's uncle's plumber's best friend's brother, how he, you know, took, you know, blue dye and it cured his cancer. That doesn't help.
Yeah.
Right. And I know people mean well when they do that,
Mhm.
but I'm not really concerned what your vet's neighbor has to say about cancer, you know, because I would get that financial. Well, my neighbor says this. What does your neighbor do? Well, he's a plumber. So then do you ask the electrician if you have to have heart surgery? So it's that. Now, for me, maybe it's a little weird. And it's not that I'm trying to avoid it, but I don't need to be reminded. I don't need a text every day. I don't need the same thing from every person every day. I'm aware. I appreciate your thoughts and prayers, and I thank you for letting me know. But I don't need a word of encouragement every day from the same people. It's like there's part of me. It's like at first, I was like, you're running away from it. No, I'm well aware of the situation, but I don't need to be reminded of it by a text 20 times a day from 20 different people either.
Right.
It's like part of me is like, just leave me alone. It is what it is. We'll keep you updated. You know, I think I'm pretty good at keeping people know kind of where things are at. And I try my best. My wife will tell me I don't communicate enough at home. And it's not that I don't mean to. It's just certain things that I'm like, well, I didn't think it was important to tell you that I was doing this that day. And sorry, you know. So
Right.
I understand where she's coming from. But it's, sometimes to me, she's like, well, that's really important. I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't even give it a second thought.
Yeah.
So, it's hard to really say what to do. The number of people that have reached out, because, you know, you realize how big your network is after 30 years, the number of people, you know, my clients all know we have not hid that from them. We talked about it earlier, you know, before we started, you know, I'm sending for a variety of reasons, have a hard time with my hands. So reply stuff to emails and stuff I'm sending via video. Well, that accomplishes 2 things. It saves me the time of typing, but they can see me. I'm still here. I'm still healthy. You know, I'm as healthy as I can be. I still am functioning. I'm active, and it gives them a little peace of mind.
Yeah.
And so the responses back have been fantastic, you know, because they're excited that, oh man, you know, good to see you. So I'm getting a ton of that. So just knowing that people care, they're praying for me around the world. That's really the thing. I'm like, appreciate your care. Thanks for reaching out, letting me know. If I need anything, I'll ask, but I know I won't because, you know, is there anything I can do for you? Not really.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you pray for me, but that's really, you know, we don't need anything. I don't need to go fund me. I don't need to bring meals. So when I had surgery, people brought meals. It just, you know, I was in the hospital for 10 days, but
Sure.
I couldn't eat them.
I know that's the thing. I'm thinking of that too. It's like, the family might, but he can't hate anything. Like
You know,
I'm
I could have a
thinking,
cup of something, you know, at a time, you know, and those some it took a while, but
yeah.
you know, I'm just so you know, if we were to go to Subway, I can eat a 6-inch sub, a bag of chips, and a drink, and it'll all fit now.
Oh, there you go.
You know, a year ago, a cup of yogurt, and I was done for an hour.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's stretched a little, but probably to its breaking point. So I've got to be really careful,
Yeah.
not overeating because I'll pay for it for about 2 hours after. So, but pretty good about that. I kind of know where to stop.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I will say you are looking good. I love the beard. Like it's looking great. So
Well, well, it's 2 daughters. No.
yeah.
Kind
No,
of it's winter. I don't
great.
get cold, but
Yeah.
you do as much chemo as I do. You have a low platelet count, and so you bleed really easy. So it's probably, and I'm not a electric razor guy, so saves me from having to.
There you go.
It's kind of a laziness and keeps me warm. So
It actually looks sharp. I like it. So
yeah, well, I keep it. My wife, if I don't get it trimmed when I get a haircut, if we get that mangy beard cleaned up. So
yeah.
so we keep it pretty neat and tidy. So yeah.
Any,
No, overall I mean, people say, how do you feel? I'm like, good, I guess. I'm like, compared to what, right? Compared to 3 years ago? No. Compared to Saturday when I was coming off my chemo? Pretty good. Right?
yeah.
I mean, to me, if I can get out of bed and walk and work, now walking, you know, I think I told you this, you know, I walk in the snow and I won't feel it,
Mm-hmm.
the neuropathy, but that's supposed to go away. But I can get up and function every day and live. You know, there's certain, I run out of gas pretty quick. You know, you've been over to my, you know, work at shop projects. I don't have it in me really to do that kind of stuff right now. And it's too cold out. But
Yeah.
But they removed one of my chemos, which causes a lot of the fatigue and the neuropathy. So which apparently they do for everybody. I thought it was just me, but they won't let you have it more than a certain amount of times because of the damage. So I'm off that, and so I've noted a difference, and I found some things that, you know, improve the outcome. If I get real heavy with fluids after chemo, it seems to flush it better, and I can stave the fatigue off till Sunday afternoon, and I'm usually feeling pretty good by Monday, you know, relatively good. But I go to that infusion center every week, and I see people in there that are gray or green and shivering in blankets and pale, and so I look at it in that context. I'm like, you know what? I'm doing really good compared to what I'm looking at. So
Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know what to compare it to, you know. Compared to Saturday, you know, Friday and Saturday for chemo, I feel pretty good. Compared to how I did 2 years ago, I don't know, probably not as good.
Yeah.
So
I imagine just keeping on with the daily routines is probably helpful and purpose. Like I would think,
yeah,
like you got to have a purpose and
there's a variety of thoughts, and I've had a million opinions. You know, I got sick about a month ago, pretty bad cold, to the point where if it didn't turn around in a day or two, my wife was going to put me in the hospital. I have basically no immune system. And I have people say to me, it's like, well, you know, you're going to your kids' sporting events, you're in a bowling alley with all those people. Yeah, but I'm not going to live my life on the sideline either. What, I'm going to just stay in the house and in bed so that I don't get sick and I live an extra month? And I'm missing my children's events, I'm missing life. And I'm like, so I've kind of made the decision, I'm not going to live my life on the sideline. You know, if a cold's going to be what takes me out, then so be it. Now, I was supposed to go to Texas in January, and I thought, yeah, maybe winter is not the best time for me to get on an airplane, and so I kind of postponed that. So I'm, you know, I don't go to church because, you know, everybody's friendly, but they cough, and then they want to shake your hand, and then I might forget to walk, you know. So, you know, and I've limited my in-office meetings face-to-face. I'm taking a few, but I'm you know, not having, you know, like Ben's taking 6 or 8 a day. Yeah. I'm taking 2 or 3 a week. You know, I've tried to push that off. So I am taking some steps to be a little careful, but I'm going to enjoy what's left. I'm not going to, you know, I always joked, I'm like, when I go, it'll be Mach 6 with my hair on fire, and I'll have used everything up left in me, and I still have that attitude. When I go, there won't be anything left. I'll have used it all. Yeah. I'm not going to leave anything on the table. So, and I generally, if I'm relaxed, I'm relaxed. But if I'm doing something, I have 2 speeds. It's 0 or 100. There's no off, there's no in between. I don't know how to do things other than that. That's just the only way I've ever been. So if I'm doing something, I'm doing it full tilt. If I'm not doing anything, I can lay on a couch all Sunday afternoon and watch football too. I can do that.
All in on the couch. Yeah. Or all in at work.
Yeah. So yeah, but, you know, I was talking to my friend David on the way in, and we were talking, you know, and his mom's in from Italy for 3 months, and she hasn't seen me for 2 years. And I said, you start to realize what's important. It's like, Yeah, work's important and it gives me purpose and things to do, but my family's important too. So, there's some opportunities coming up that we can travel here. We've got vacation planned, and it's like, I'm going to try to take more opportunity, to do that. Now, I'd love to take them to Alaska and Hawaii yet. Don't know if it's in the cards, but you got to plan that out, but then I can only plan it out 2 weeks. I can postpone. So there's certain things that are on hold as far as how do you plan it, but, I'm not going to just sit and wait for
Yeah.
that to come. So people ask, my doctor had asked me, people ask how much time. I said, I don't need you putting a number in my head. And he looked at me, he goes, good. He goes, because at the end of the day, he goes, I don't get to decide either. And so people ask, well, how much time do you have? I'm like, I don't know. We'll know on the last day.
What you're talking about the travel, and I've always wondered like this, because when you have to plan for 2 weeks or something, I mean, they have, again, I don't know enough about it, but can you plan for things like, hey, I'll do my chemo in Hawaii? Like,
I don't know.
I don't know.
Blue Cross is fickle about what they want to pay for. It's one of those things. But I'm on a treatment regimen where they can adjust those. So if I took a week off, it wouldn't be detrimental. They had told me that. If you need something comes up. So like next week, we're probably going to end up in Detroit for state finals. Well, I have to leave on Thursday afternoon. Well, we're pumped from Wednesday to Friday. So I asked them, they got to get, of course, the insurance company, heaven forbid we do it a day early. They might.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But they approved it, so I can do it Tuesday, and then I'll get my pump out Thursday. That's the plan for next week. So there's room. So if I were to go on vacation for 2 weeks, I could still plan that. I just delay treatment for 1 week. And if 1 week is the difference between living and dying, then, I'm already there anyway. So, yeah.
Enjoy the, yeah. So any advice? Like, I mean, everybody's different. You're different than somebody else, but I mean, is there anything that you've kind of learned going through this that you didn't before that you might offer to somebody?
I don't know about learn, but it just solidified things. It's just, I have daughters, you have daughters, right? They worry about stuff. And, I would joke sometimes with my oldest, I'm like, I have the gift of blankness. Because she said, how in the world is it you can go lay down in your bed and in 3 minutes you're sound asleep no matter what happened? I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's just, I've always been that way. And so you think about what's going on and, do you have anxiety? I don't. I don't like it. I don't want it to happen. I think about, what's it going to be like at the end? Is it going to hurt? Is it going to be, and I think my biggest fear is I don't want to see my children watch me shrivel up and shrink and just my body, I've lost 90 pounds, right? I can't afford to lose any more weight. Now, I look pretty good, probably at the normal height and weight that I should be, but, so I don't want them to see their dad just kind of disintegrate, even though I know that's probably going to happen. So I don't worry about that, but it's, there's a lot of things I don't want for my wife and children to have to go through, but I can't control it. So you can dwell on it and it can bring you down. And a lot of people have that. It's why, there's not enough mental health practitioners out there because people are struggling. People are suffering. I've never been that guy, right? It's the hand I'm dealt. It is what it is. I would joke. I said that to my daughter the other day. I said, look, I'm Dutch. We work and then we die. That's it.
Sure.
So I don't know if I learn, I've learned to let go, I still have a tendency. I'm a little bit of a control freak. So I'm trying to learn how to let go of things that are important. At work, I've been able to pawn off a lot of responsibility I don't want to do anymore. At home, it's still a little bit more, no, this is my thing. Even at work, we can do this for you. I'm like, no, I will ask for help. Don't just assume I need help, And so it was more prevalent last year when I was coming back. They were just doing things for me. I'm like, just stop. I'll ask first. I don't. And to me, I try to explain it to my family. I'm like, there comes a point where you're trying to do this, and I know your heart's in the right place, and people want to do things for me. And I said, understand, though, when you start going too far down this road, you rob people of their dignity, too.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of this balancing act. So for the last month, the neuropathy's been bad enough for my balance. I got to walk with a cane. Now I'm kind of putting it to the side. It's like, well, you can't I'm like, just let me go. Let me, I've got to be able to do this. Don't take away what dignity I have left, So, but the biggest thing is like, control what you can control and don't worry about what you can't control. And I've been that way most of my life, but this has just really made it, you have to. I mean, I'd probably go stir crazy and just go insane if I actually thought about the consequences.
Oh, sure.
But again, gift of blankness probably.
I think even, obviously it's different when somebody just retires, but I see people go in a year or two after they retire because they sit around and I always say they sit down and watch Gunsmoke and Bonanza reruns and they're done.
Yeah.
Because they stop having a purpose.
Accurate. My dad retired 16 years ago. And I would tell you still at 70 years old, he's probably busier now than he did when he had a job.
Yeah.
And he likes to be busy. And I remember years ago, I asked him, I said, could you come over to the house, some afternoon? I need a third hand to help me. Oh, I'm too busy. What do you mean? Oh, I got a lot to do. I said, you don't even have a job. And he said to me, he goes, well, a job just gets in the way of all the things you need to do. Now, this is a guy that worked in a factory his whole life.
Yeah.
Punched a clock from 6 to 3:30 and, sometimes worked on Saturday, and that's all he ever did. So for him, retirement was, I finally can do what I want to do. For me, I love what I do, so I've always thought that, well, I can spend 3 months in Florida and I can work from there.
Sure.
And so I never saw myself retiring in the traditional sense. Because I've got to stay busy. I'm a busy, but I've got to have something to do. And there's only so many projects around the house. And like I said, I could try to golf every day. I mean, it's a challenge I'd be willing to accept. But yeah, that's, life is what you make of it. And, you can dwell on it, which, I'm guilty of, getting in a bad mood over this once in a while. And like I said, my family probably takes the brunt of that. But overall, I'm not going to say I embrace it, but I'm not running away from it either.
So I've kind of asked a similar question to, I had a guy on here that'd been in 37 years in the same industry, in the mortgage industry. And is there any advice, just general of, hey, I've been through a lot of stuff that you'd want to share?
Stick and stay and make it pay.
Stick and stay and make it pay. Perseverance and, I'm like, what's that?
Determination.
Where'd that come from?
Yeah. It's, we can have all kinds of theory and all that, but at the end of the day, I will attribute my success to my upbringing.
Yeah.
My dad showed me how to work hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I still am of the belief that for the most part, there's people that end up being, CEOs or, big, Elon Musk types or Jeff Bezos, but that's an anomaly.
Yeah.
For most people, I don't care what your background is, what your degree's in, you're all going to have an awful hard trying to outwork a guy like me.
Yeah.
And hard work generally will pay off. Now, work smart, not hard, comes into play too, because I see that with a lot of small business. I'm like, yeah, you're banging your head against the wall. Don't do it this way. And you're working really, really hard, but you're not working smart about it. You need to make some changes. And so that's one of the biggest joys of my work now is seeing these young guys start a business and going, no, do it this way. And you see them become successful. It's like, I have a friend, which you know well, he worked for a corporation. He's in the trades. Always had this fear. I don't know if I can make it. I'm worried about health insurance, and am I going to make enough money? And he finally made the leap about 5 years ago. He's making 4 or 5 times the money he ever would have made working for somebody else. And the best decision ever. But he wouldn't have got there without encouragement. His family was supportive. And I'm not going to take a lot of the credit, but I'm like, you can do this. Let me help you on this side of it and help you. And he will tell you to this day, he's like, if you didn't push me over that edge, I wouldn't have probably done it.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so to me, that's probably I get the most fulfillment out of my work of that is seeing somebody take that step. And I started a business, about 28 years ago. Trust me, I've made more mistakes than you can fathom. A lot of our mistakes where we run through things like a bull in a china shop. That didn't work real well. You kind of look back and go, yeah, that's probably a dumb way to do it. Right.
I think that's super important. And I'd say that's the one thing it's hard to get into my kids is like, it's okay to make mistakes. Like, make the mistake, learn from it, and move on.
Yeah.
And there seems to be I don't know if it's just because I'm a parent or if it's generational, but seems to be a little bit of a fear to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And learn from them, move on.
Well, never see failure as failure, but look at it as an opportunity to reset and succeed. John Maxwell wrote that book years ago, Failing Forward.
Yeah.
Very good book. It's like, if you're not failing, you're not trying. Right?
Oh, yeah. You can't. It's just, they go together.
Yeah.
Stick and stay and make it pay.
Yeah.
Right?
That was my partner's great-grandfather out of upstate Washington. That was always his motto, and we've kind of adopted it. The other thing in our office is always math wins.
No, sure.
You can argue with me all you want, but math will always win. So.
Especially in your business.
Yeah. So.
Well, anything else you'd like to share as we wrap up?
No, I'm not necessarily. I mean, I just, if, people are, story, the cancer thing, I get a lot of questions on that. And it's, if I can help anybody out, I mean, you got to trust your doctor. Now, him and I don't, his bedside man, we don't see eye to eye, but his skill set is probably second to none. So I tolerate it, even though he irritates me sometimes. So you got to trust your care team, rely on your family. Try not to bite back at them. I'm probably the worst culprit of that. They're struggling with it the same, just in a different way. But I would tell you, if you don't have a church family, that's a big part of it. My wife, I saw one of our clients came in today, and she goes, "I saw your wife in church yesterday." And so I get cards from these widows that are in their 80s. We're praying for you. So if I didn't have that to fall back on with my family, I don't know. I have something greater to look forward to. So maybe I think that probably has a lot to do with my attitude.
Yep.
Which is an interesting juxtaposition we talk about. I'm like, I've read Revelation more times than I can count. I know what I'm expecting. But then why am I fighting so hard not to go yet? So it's this interesting dilemma you wrestle with in your brain, which nobody's really been able to answer, other than my pastor. He's like, well, it's not your time yet. Because obviously there's still something you're here to serve for some reason. So so I would encourage people, if they want to talk to me about that, I'm open to sharing that too.
That's awesome.
And I think without that, that comfort, I think that's probably the one thing that more than anything is why I don't worry about it. It was set in stone before I was born anyways. So it's part of the plan. It wasn't necessarily my plan, but it's the plan.
Right.
So we'll just see where the ride takes us.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, Dan.
Yeah, no, apprate it.
I think you guys.
Love having you. Have me.
Yeah. No, it's been great.
We'll
I was
that part out.
hoping
That
last year.
Right.
Love having you, have me. Sounds like a song.
Yeah, we'll write a song.
So till next time, we'll see you guys. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time around. Thanks. Hey, let's pause for a moment to thank our sponsors, the Palmer Group with 616 Realty, a small, experienced real estate team right here in West Michigan with over 20 years experience helping buyers, sellers, builders, and investors reach their real estate goals. We love to solve problems, and we're quite often known as the problem solver. So if you have a real estate challenge, want to look for that dream home, need help figuring out that tricky land deal, give us a call. We'd love to help. You can find more out at ThePalmer.Group. That's ThePalmer.Group, not ThePalmer.com. ThePalmer.Group.
Tell me that I'm never gonna make it.